Yeah, I've got it.
All right, cool. All right, Jerry, why don't you do your intro and I'll do mine?
Okay. First off, we appreciate the opportunity to be here with Fire Nuggets and to do our gig. There's a lot more of this online stuff than there ever has been. We've gotten comfortable with it, but if we get glitches, we get glitches. We'll run with it. We're going to get our engine nerd on tonight. We're going to go pretty deep. So a little bit about me with Elkhart Brass. Been with them since 2006. I'm what you might refer to as a dinosaur in the fire service. Been in a long time, but I'd like to think I caught up. And what I do is interact a lot with our relationships with instructor networks and teaching at hot events throughout the country, and support our regional managers at different hands-on events throughout North America. I do get involved somewhat on the distribution network, mostly from a training standpoint, but our regional managers in each distinct region across the U.S. primarily manage the business side of things. So I'm lucky enough where I can kind of float above that and just pretty much stay on the hands-on side.
Thanks, Jerry. My name's Chris Martin. I started as a cadet in high school, like probably many of you. Worked as a student fireman and started interning at Elkhart Brass in college. And then after that, I started working for them and been there since. I've done sales gigs on the West Coast, international. Our product manager. Now I do some of our marketing too, and I still work actively for my local department. But real quick, since this is for Fire Nuggets, I just want to share one little antidote I have with Fire Nuggets. You can put yourself in the shoes of, and obviously all of you are here and you know about Fire Nuggets, and you know what a class act pretty much everybody with this organization is. We're really honored to be able to do this tonight. When I first started in 2003 with in the field with Elkhart, I was on the West Coast. So you can picture, I just recently turned 40. I think that's as many years as Jerry's been in the fire service. Sorry, it's first jab of the night.
Yeah.
Write it down. Sure. But when I was a 22-year-old Chris Martin in California working for Elkhart, out flowing water and doing my best to tread water, and I get a call from our East Coast rep, Gordy Harris. Gordy is an old salty guy, went to Oklahoma State with John Norman and Bob Pressler. And he calls me and he's like, "Hey, you're the new kid. You need to go to Angels Camp, California on this day. And they're doing a memorial golf tournament for this guy, Andy Fredericks. We were all really close to him. He's weighing the nozzles. You just go there, wear your Elkhart shirt and represent us." So, okay, whatever you say, Gordy. So I drive up there so you can picture this. We got the company ride and we pull in and here I get out, Chris Martin in my Elkhart Brass polo and my khaki pants, and and in the parking lots, Daryl Liggins and Jeff Shoup and Jay Camella and Ted Corporani and Paul Schuler, and I think when a lot of people would have probably looked at me and gone, "What the hell? Who the hell is this kid?" They said, "Come on in, brother." And from that point on, I went a couple of years to that golf tournament. I hope to return to it today, and I learned all about Andy at that, and it's kind of an honor still even to be doing this tonight and carrying on his message. But again, we can't say enough about Fire Nuggets. Been pretty fortunate. Me and another colleague, we just started our own local affiliate here in Indiana called the Lake Effect. Fire Nuggets, we're doing hard to try to do our own conference and bring our training to our local area. So again, I can't say enough about this organization and how great they are and paying it forward to the fire service. So anyway, that's my little story to get us going. A little bit about Elkhart Brass, and since that's who employs us, and as Jerry say, we'll tell you, we're in no position to sell you anything. We work directly for the manufacturer. I'm work for product development. Jerry's in the field working with high profile accounts, doing flow testing, analysis, whatnot. Everything is purchased through distributor network. We are purely the educators and instructors of water flow pertaining to our company. So don't worry, you're not gonna get pitched on anything tonight. Tonight's all about the hard facts, much like our video series. So we're gonna tell you a little bit about Elkhart and a little bit about the video series, and we're gonna get right into it. So we were founded in 1902 by Albert Hansen. He was a Norwegian immigrant. We have a very wide range of water flow products. We're in all kinds of markets. Typically, our world is handline nozzles, right? Smooth bores, fogs, ram monitors, deck guns, valves. In fact, some of our biggest customers, are Saudi Aramco, the national oil company of Saudi Arabia. We sell tremendous amount of product that goes to industrial facilities, all brass installations, apparatus, valves. A tremendous amount of product goes to the military. So most of the nozzles on any U.S. Navy ship is built at our facility in Elkhart, Indiana. It's all brass, 95-gallon minute nozzles for anybody that's served. Building systems, so interior valves, pressure reducing valves, field adjustable angle valves, sidewalk Siameses, escutcheons. We make all of those. And then we also have a couple reps that do construction and mining, believe it or not. So they use our monitors to strip mine, or they'll use them to wash those giant Tonka trucks and get all the dirt and debris off of them. So we're in a lot of different things than just handline nozzles like we're going to talk to tonight. And one of our advantages too is in 2015, we were family owned up until 2015, and we were acquired by Safe Fleet. So Safe Fleet is built up, it's us and three other companies in our division, which is the Fire EMS and Industrial Division. And those companies you've probably heard of are Fire Research, probably they do your governors and your lighting. Foam Pro does your foam systems, and ROM does your is a roll-up door company. So by bundling us together, that's given us some advantages and been able to roll with some new product development and whatnot. Some innovations in the 1910s, when we first opened, we got into fire extinguishers. So just like the one over my shoulder here, those things sit in your firehouse. You'll see them at flea markets now on eBay. Highly collectible. We made tons of those things. If you're on the West Coast, think about in the 1910s what it took to get one of those from Elkhart, Indiana to the West Coast. So snatch that thing up. In the 1920s, we came up with the first ball type shutoff. So if you enjoy the ability to turn your water on and off, you're welcome. In 1930s, we imported the mystery nozzle from the Mystery Nozzle Company in Hamburg, Germany. So you can blame us for that if you're not a fog guy. And in the 1940s were our first portable monitors. The 50s, selectable flow became the rage. In the 70s, the Selectomatic automatic type nozzles. And the 80s led us to the modern chief handline fog nozzles, Stinger monitors. The 2000s, we've gotten to some remote control monitors and field adjustable standpipe valves. And just a couple of years ago, back and kind of refreshing and updating our handline series, simplifying it, making the options easier, making it more rugged and whatnot. So that's a little about Elkhart, a little bit about brass tacks. So I'm assuming if you're tuning in tonight, you've seen or heard of the brass tacks hard facts video series. So this is our good friend here, Brian Brush. Sure you all know Brian if you're on a Fire Nuggets webinar. And we were kind of, shooting the breeze about, every type of video that's done by a manufacturer is, this is the Model A. And if you don't buy the Model A, your fires aren't going to go out, right? We know that's true. There's no bigger, no bigger bullshit detectors than firefighters, right? If it's not authentic, it's not real, we're going to turn it off pretty fast. So the idea with Brass Tacks Hard Facts was, how can we break down some of these instructors who we've had relationships with over the years and get down to a video that's more or less the length of a song, 2 to 5 minutes, something that's educational, it's a quick nugget, that's something that can go start a drill. You watch a video and you go out on the app floor and knock it out, or refresh you on a topic you might not have heard of since the Fire Academy, or all standpipe valves aren't the same, those kind of things. So we came up with the concept. We got the budget together. We got the shot list together. We got the instructors, and this is us right here. This is Jerry, Brian, and the guy sitting down across from Jerry is Brian Kerr. So Brian Kerr, we did a Brass Tacks Hard Facts live with Brian. You can go on our YouTube channel and make it. And he was he was a man behind the lens, if you will. So Brian's great, and Brian's also a training officer. So he's on the Minnetonka Fire Department. We filmed all these in Eden Prairie, if there's any Minnesotans in the room tonight. So when we shot these, it wasn't like, in the past when we've had to hire outside companies and you're spending half of a day explaining to them how it should look and feel, and firefighters don't talk like this, and you're not going to hold the nozzle like that. So by having Brian behind the lens, it really helped us kind of tell that story from, you know, a training perspective. So this is the night before our first shoot, and we kind of holed up at a residence inn for the week, and instead of going out, we barbecued every night, and you can see we got the Dale's Pale Ale on the table, and that's the Dave Fornell book open, and the whiteboards, and just, you know, what are we going to film tomorrow? So then we fast forward basically 12 hours later. This is what it looks like. So there's Brian behind the camera. You know, and originally, you know, we thought of the whole, you know, one camera thing. I got an iPhone and a gimbal. You know, I think the big thing that helped with this is the production value. It was more than we even expected once we got into this. And you'll see this through these pictures. We don't share a lot of these. We just kind of show them in our class of what goes on behind the scenes. So there's Brian. And then we had Kurt, was the next day of season 1. And then Jerry and I, we did a day, you know, that was kind of more nutsy, boltsy kind of stuff, how to verify accuracy of gauges and cleaning nozzles. And you can see here the setup to, you know, diffuse light and make sure the shot's right. And you start learning really fast why these actors get paid what they get paid. Because, you know, I could probably talk to you guys tonight for 2 hours about cleaning nozzles, but when you're standing behind that camera and they say action, and you need to talk about it for 2 minutes, it's just, you know, blah, you know, just jello comes out of your mouth. There's Jerry Knapp. And then there's Jeff Shoup. Jeff didn't have any problem communicating with us. In fact, Jeff, right in that scene right there, just started talking for about 15 minutes. and we eventually had to stop him and then go back and say, okay, well, what did we just get? We got the brass tacks, hard facts of this and of this and of this. So, and then we did season 2, same crew, different instructors, same facility. And there you can see Ray talking about the standpipe bag, and as he proves that all news people know that, you know, they don't wear pants behind the scenes, you know, from the waist up, man, nobody's going to see it. And there's Chief McGrail. So, you know, these were long days, multiple takes in the hot sun. It's a good kind of photo of kind of the exhaustion really it can take out of you by doing these all day over and over and over. There's Dennis and Dennis Laguerre and Daryl Liggins. You know, Dennis, of course, has his moleskin book, taking notes. And then this video here I'm going to play. This is a little shot setup. So this is kind of a behind the scenes. So our last episode of season 1 was how air entrainment can affect your fire attack. So Jerry Knapp has done a tremendous amount of work on this topic. And, you know, we had some streamers set up, and it's a really cool episode. So this is about a minute video showing you what goes on to setting up the shot. So you might see a 3-minute episode. This took us probably about an hour and a half to get this set up just right.
Yeah, it's gonna be like the neighbor between my hand and the ceiling is where it should. Yes, so or we have it further away. A little higher, no? Hey, Chris, sir, you won't be in charge of the GoPro? This is going to be for probably the same. We're still at 6 frames, 2.7. Why do you kind of go? We'll have to turn off the lights here. We'll have to do your voice.
So that's a little bit of kind of, you know, what went on behind it. This was the wrap of season 1 and the crew, from the production assistant to camera, sound, lighting. It was pretty intense. So the first 2 years of Brass Tacks, so this came out in 2016, we had about 3.1 million minutes viewed. So if any of you are social media geeks, you have a side hustle, you do it for your fire department. You know, when you look on the videos, they go a lot of times by minutes viewed. So when you see the view and it's like, wow, I got 15,000 views of my kid throwing spaghetti. You know, if it starts playing automatically on your feed, that counts as a view. So we really looked down at like the minutes viewed. In those first 2 years, you know, it was almost, if you started watching them, it was about 6 years worth that had been watched. Most of it came from Facebook, some of it from Google. Our Facebook following went from 12,000 to it's almost up to 50,000 now. Our Instagram was nothing. We didn't have a page. We're pushing 17,000 now. So please go check us out there. We're always putting new stuff up. And the point of this is to not necessarily, you know, brag and say, oh my God, look how great this is and look how great we are. It's to say, you know, look what a big of a need was out there for this type of training, you know, and to the fact that, you know, even in 2020, when we were just kind of desperate for stuff to look at, how people consume information now is a lot different, right? It's not sitting down and going through something and being spoon fed to you. You know, people download stuff and look at stuff on their own and want to figure it out for themselves. And this series really, you know, kind of proved that, you know, this is an adequate, you know, medium to get stuff out there and connect us with the fire service, and kind of got our personality as the Elkhart guys out there. You know, that 2002 Chris Martin showing up, you know, hey, this was us and brass tacks. You know, we like flowing water. We're going to educate you as we will tonight. You know, we're not going to pitch you, and ultimately, you know, you'll resolve to your decision that's the best for your fire department. So this series really helped us to kind of get that personality out to everybody. Now I'm going to throw it over to Jerry for a little bit.
All right, great. Thanks, Stretch. And just one thing there, that, you know, that everything that he just talked about relates more to the credibility of the company, and we just try and portray that when we're in the field. But it is a real thing. We were talking a little bit offline with Jeff before we started, and our focus is solutions and then spec way before there's any kind of a transaction. And we're not a part of the transaction. That's entirely up to you. All right, so what we're going to do, I like quotes, I like analogies, so we'll be using a couple of those. This is one from Abe Lincoln, and we're going to do some sharpening tonight. We're going to go deep. You're going to get your engine nerd on. I do classes like this probably 40, 50 times, sometimes a year. Not last year, obviously. But one of the things I do before we kick off, and I can't do it here, but I bet you it would still be the same. I normally do a poll of the class, and I get an idea of the years of service. I kind of do a how many 0 to 5, 5 to 10, and 10 to 15. And inevitably, we have a very broad range of experience in this type of class. And this is people choosing to spend their time to come and listen to this, and many times paying money to come to listen to it. And what that tells us is the subject matter is relevant regardless if it's your first day or your last day. And a lot of what we're dealing with water flow, especially if you were thumbprinted early, like myself, was poorly represented, and it was based on assumptions. So we're going to break a lot of that today. Next slide. One of the first acronyms I'm going to show you, and this is going to prevail tonight, all right? CPR. And when I'm talking CPR, I'm not talking about chest pumping. I'm talking about the confidence to pursue reality. And when it comes to water flow, especially in attack lines, the reality is you have to have a flow that's adequate enough for today's fire. That's the target flow. And it has to be manageable by one firefighter and not your best performer. And by any stretch of the imagination, not your best performer. So you cannot spec a solution or an attack system to your rock stars, because you might not be working with a rock star. So we're going to get deep into that and talk about the reality of that, and go way past what you can build on paper and how it has to apply into the street. So we'll kick that off a little bit about, you know, the ice cream thing was, you can make ice cream look real pretty. You can put hot fudge, you can put nuts, you can put cherries. Bottom line is, if the base layer, the cream, is no good, all it does is look pretty. And what I'm talking about is engines. You got people spending $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 on a fire engine, dual federal queues, every light system known to man, and you got people that it takes them longer to repack a pre-connect than it does to put a knock on a fire. It's crazy. We need to simplify things. So a little bit about the science side of firefighting, and we embrace this. UL and this, we partner with them. We're involved with this. People take that information, they tear it up, they mock it, whatever. from our perspective, take from it what you can. It all has value, but it's simple as this. If you're not flowing enough water, you're not going to win in a timely fashion. And if you're not winning in a timely fashion, you're not flowing enough water, you're putting people in jeopardy. And that's what we're about fixing. All right, slide. We'll talk a little bit about what's changed. And it's not so much that cliche of today's fire versus yesterday's fire. But if we look at what we're dealing with in a modern fire environment, things are burning a lot more rapidly. The heat release rates are ridiculous now compared to what they were 40, 50 years ago. A lot of it is driven by construction. It's evolved, but anybody that's been on the job, a long period of time, you'd be hard pressed to get from them that the fire is not different now than it was. So we have to attack with a different methodology, but hydraulics and water flow and a lot of the books that are out there that teach this are stuck in a paradigm that's based on the older legacy type fire, especially from a water versus BTU standpoint. Slide. So there's the tough math of the day, okay? BTU versus GPM, the biggest one wins. And what I mean by this is this is not a chess game. There is no check. You're either overtaking the fire or the fire is going to overtake you. There's never this second where it's equal. And, I was a chief, I'd stand in the street, you'd be calling for an attack team update or something like that. And you hear things, and I used to love this. Yeah, we're holding our own. Well, I don't know what the hell that means, but, smoke isn't changing color and the line isn't moving, nothing's happening. Maybe you're sitting at the top of the stairs seasoning your helmet. But if you don't have enough water to overtake the fire is eventually going to overtake you. And, that older fire, that 8 or 10,000 BTU fire was engaged by what? Booster lines, maybe a 90 GPM, fog nozzle. But now we have heat release rates and BTU loads in the 20,000s, which is more than 2 times. So simple math would tell you we should be attacking with probably double the water that we were on that older fire. But now we get into this paradigm of, okay, that makes sense mathematically, but can our people hold on to that much water and advance it and get to where they need to be? So that's where we're going to start peeling layers of this onion back. Eventually what we get to is this, right? You've got the intersection. You've got the intersection of pressure, nozzle reaction, gallons per minute, and the star is the winning attack package. And I want everybody to be pretty damn impressed that I had to print this backwards because I'm on TV right now. So that intersection becomes crucial. And if you assume a rule of thumb your way through that, yeah, eventually, you know what, your fires are going to go out. Because unless you're at that mine fire in Pennsylvania, sooner or later, everybody's going to win. But the question to ask yourself is, where are you taking this thing on the fire curve, right? Fire starts, increases, peaks, declines, and then goes out. We're supposed to catch it somewhere close to where it is when we arrive. That's our job. That's what we're sworn to do. But in many cases, what we do is we eliminate the fuel. We burn it down to the point where what we're flowing can put it out. We're taking away the wrong leg of that triangle. So we need to address that. And the way to do that is to go deep and test and develop a system that makes sense based on your world, your rigs, your people, your staffing, and types of fires you go to. All right, slide. So let's talk about fires. Let's say that, you pull up on a three-man engine on this. Boss says, yeah, he thinks it's a room and content fire. You're stretching up. You're going right to left or front to back. And you get up there and, shit's going bad. You don't have to find the scuttle hole to the attic because it just blew through. You got a couple rooms off. It's hot. You're sticking to the carpet mat. You're not winning. What are your options? In some cases, you might be jumping out of a window upside down on a little piece of rope. That's scary. That's dangerous. If you've ever had to do it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Would it be great if there was a bigger line or a second line right behind you? Yeah, it would. How often does that happen based on your staffing? If you're in an urban environment where you're getting 3 and 2 on a box and you got a ton of firefighters, you probably will have another line there. If you're in the rest of the world, you won't. So you want to stack it to the point where the deck is more in your favor. So you want to flow as much water as you can possibly do, but still have it manageable so that you can get to the seat of the fire. In some cases, and it's horrible as we travel across the country in North America and everywhere, you find departments that are actually more proficient at doing bailouts than they are putting fires out. And that's scary. All right, slide. All right, so attack methodology. I would normally ask the class, and inevitably there's someone in there that's been in long enough, and some people are still using it. I would ask who's using 1.5 inch hose and why the fire service evolved to 1 3/4 inch. And the answers, I'll give them to you. It's pretty obvious. They went to 1 3/4 inch because they didn't like pulling 2.5 inch. They needed something in between where they could flow a bit more water with what? Less nozzle reaction, right? So if you make the line a little bit bigger, you can get more volume. We still have a mobile line with 1 3/4 inch. They want it to flow more water. Several larger urban fire departments had done research to validate that 1 3/4 inch was a great solution package. Those urban fire department staffings are much higher than the staffing of the majority of the American Fire Service, yet the majority of the American Fire Service chases urban standards, right? Hence the reason the 15/16 was the most popular smoothbore size until just recently. Why? Because a major East Coast fire department with a 4-letter acronym used it. They also went to the 1 3/4 inch. So our attack methodology has changed. We've advanced from 1.5 inch to 1 3/4 inch. We started to get a little bit smarter on this, and then we've created this environment in the fire service now. All of a sudden, and Stretch will allude to this later, engine's cool again, right? And what we mean by that is, with all due respect to ranking seniority, if you're a ride backwards firefighter, and I am to this day, you've got every right to know how much water is coming out of that line. You've got every right to know what your attack capability is and the science behind it to get it to the point whether it's adequate or not. And when you start to look at that, and we see this in classes all the time, we call it the epiphany. We start talking and we ask questions like, how many times have you been pushed out and why, right? And it's sooner or later you get back to the fact that the American Fire Service by and large pumps to comfort and not to flow. If you're in a major urban fire department and let's say I had 25 chauffeurs in the room, if I talked to 10 of them and asked them what their SOP for a pump discharge is on a pre-connect, I'd probably get maybe half of them tell me what the SOP is. If I asked them what they actually pump out, I'd probably get almost 10 different answers. Some jobs have the discipline to get around that. Many jobs don't. Okay, slide. I put this in here, credit to Jerry Knapp. I got the photo from him. This is a daytime fire. It's mutual aid. You can tell because there's different color costumes, and they pulled a 2.5 inch on this. Some people would pull 1 3/4 inch. I probably would too, and you could get it. They chose big line and smacked it in the face and got it done. But I have in just about every course I put this picture in because it creates dialogue. In the dialogue I ask would be like, what would you pull? And they'd be like, I'd pull 1 3/4 inch. I'm like, why wouldn't you pull a 2.5 inch? Well, sometimes they say the fire load didn't look like it would require it. But in many cases I hear because I don't have the people to do it. Now that starts to raise a flag. So if we have officers making the call of line size based on the limitations of staffing, that's a problem because line choice should be pulled based on what? Fire load and the conditions presented upon arrival. All right, so move on, slide. Click through these, OV guy takes the window, they've just plastered this thing. All right, so here's where we're gonna go deep. You have to take a look at your entire TAC package as a system, right? You've heard the buzzwords. If you're on here, you're probably dialed in or trying to get dialed into this. And if you've been to any of our classes in the field, this is where we go deep. We are not here to tell you how to put your fires out. Our subject matter expertise is in the creation of an effective fire stream. Whether your people can hold on to it or not is entirely up to you. But let's start to take a look at this system and how it can impact what our decision-making capability is. Supply is a given. You either have a good supply or you don't. If you have a great hydrant system, you're blessed. If your hydrant spacing is a couple 100 feet, mine's 500, it's great if I'm in an area that has hydrants. If you don't, you become creative at carrying water on the axle. You'll overcome that challenge so that you have water to fight the fire upon arrival. The engine section of this gets a ton of attention, and it's primarily driven by the fact that it costs a lot of money. All right. So it's a high profile purchase. I said it before, $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 for a fire engine. And it's pretty. It makes a lot of noise, but is it spec to what your world is? And that's where we have to start asking questions, because, you know, if I was to ask the group, what size pumpers you have? Stretch, what do you guys have on your job?
1,500.
All right, you have 15s. If I ask Jeff, it might be 15s, it might be 1250s, sometimes 1750, 2000 GPM. We got these monster capacity engines. And what we're realizing in many cases is the industry is supply side obsessed. You know, if you have a 2000 GPM engine or 1750 GPM engine, I would ask you this: when's the last time you pumped capacity out of fire? You'll do it in testing. You might get a big surround and drown on a warehouse or a block fire or something like that where you're flowing a bunch of water. But by and large, that engine is normally providing hand line flows to 1 or 2 lines, and that's where we're engaging fire. All right, so let's go to the next portion of the system, which is hose and nozzle. And they need to be a system together. We've run into a lot of problems with hose and nozzle mismatch. If I was to ask 12 of our field guys, out of 10 visits where they're flowing water and doing classes and hands-on demos, how many of those that are having to overcome hose issues, it would probably be around 70 or 80%. So 7 or 8 out of 10 times, they're coming up with a package that has to overcome a limitation in the hose. And by and large, the American Fire Service for years has looked at all 1 3/4 hose as the same. Now you have True ID, you have 175, 77, 78, 79. You've got some more hose choices now than you've ever had. It just confused things even more. But you got to get it to the point where it works together. And the bottom one is people. I don't know if you can see it. It's not on my screen. So you got supply, engine, hose and nozzles, and then people. And people are the most critical resource, right? You can spec an attack package to flow whatever you want for water. You want to flow 500 gallons a minute, we'll make you something. If we don't, that already does. Your people can't hold on to it. You might want to flow 210. You might want to flow 175, 150. It doesn't matter. Your crews need to be able to pull, deploy, and get to the seat of the fire in a rapid fashion. You need to put yourself between, how's the saying go? You need to be between the people and the problem. That's where you need to be. So people is a big factor in this. And it's like I said before, you cannot spec your attack system to your star. You have to consider the weak link. And with that, many times comes tough decisions, especially in fire departments that aren't quite so large, and you have a very diverse capability spectrum. You might find that some people aren't built to do handline work. Here's one of these CPR. Here's a reality. I was the line boss for a long time. You're and here, picture yourself with this. You're en route to a fire, you're getting multiple calls. You know you're going to a job. You look in the back and you're like, oh shit, we're gonna lose. It's just a reality. Sometimes you're stacked, sometimes you're not. And you have to take that into consideration when you're designing an attack package. Now, that being said, many times there's senior people in the back looking at a Ricky boss saying we're gonna lose, saying the same thing. It goes both ways. All right, slide. Regardless of how you approach this, and there's a lot of work to get there, and I'll give you this in current vernacular: the cut and paste solution doesn't work. You might cut and paste somebody else's solution that has nothing to do with your world. If you're riding 3 and you copy a solution for somebody that rides 6 or even 4 and has multiple engines on a first alarm, and you get 1 out, it's not going to work. It has to be relative to your world. So you have to get deep, and then you have to get to the simple, right? The simple is the adoption part. And this is where you put it in people's hands. Probably the biggest thing we impact when we're teaching on the field is we go concept inside, depth of understanding. We try and get through some of the myths. You know, a good example of a myth is what I learned when I first got in. There was 3 tip pressures, 50, 80, and 100. That was my world. 50 was smooth bores and appliances, 80 was master streams, and 100 was fog tips, period. Is that relative now? Yet that is still what some academies teach. And most firefighters can cite that off because they looked at it, they were drilled on it, and they were tested on it. But if you think 100 psi is the most common tip pressure for a hand line today, we're gonna change your mind on that by the time we're done. Okay, so simple. It takes hard work to get there. Next slide. A little bit about standards. I'm not a big fan of standard chasing. I'm a fan personally, as if my opinion would weigh much. It probably doesn't in your world, but I think standards should be interpreted to your reality. Work towards achieving a standard. There's probably not a high number of NFPA compliant fire departments in the United States, yet we should work towards those standards because those standards drive safety and on our operations. But 1710 states that they want a couple hands lines flowing. It's got a minimum. We're looking for 300 GPM total. Yet we're still in our testing environment. What we run into in the field is people that are flowing 9,500, sometimes 80 gallons a minute, maybe 125. And that's where we find we're kind of, as one of our guys, Chuck Small told me, and I stole it from him. We're fighting it to the ground. We're taking away the wrong leg, right? We're letting fuel consume to the point where what we flow with water makes us look like a hero. Next slide.
I'm going to talk about this real quick. And as you're kind of picking up now, we're kind of explaining like how to explain, if you will. And these pictures here, the three guys on my left, the one in the middle is my stepdad, and the one in the middle photo there is his dad, and they were both South Bend firefighters. So combined, they did over 50 years on the South Bend Fire Department. So like a lot of you probably watching, you grew up with it. And I'd hear a lot of stories from these guys, right? Just as I'm sure you have from senior members or family members. And what do you think I heard all the time? You can put a lot of fire out with the booster line, right? And then the next comment was always, Del Herman was the best driver on the South Bend Fire Department, because if you were getting pushed out, you went back to the front porch and there was a inch and a half waiting for you, right, on the front door. So you run it with the booster, and then the driver would stretch it and leave it on the front door if you needed a bigger flow, right? So so a lot of these questions start coming up. So you're starting to comprehend, hey, we're outgunned, we might need a change. And you might run into issues in your organization of like, with senior members of why don't they understand this? It's like I'm speaking a foreign language, and you start thinking about what era did they learn to fight fire in? Okay, so if they're a senior chief now and who's been off the line for a while, when they fought fire was completely different than how we fight fire today. As Jerry talked about, modern fire environment, flow rate, yada yada, UL. So what era do your tactics come from, right? That kind of thumbprints you as you go through your career, right? It worked for you as a young firefighter, as you promoted up and you got off the nozzle. It still worked. As we say, the fire's out and you high five and you come back tomorrow and do it again, or later that night. Now you high five, you take a selfie, you put it on Instagram, tell everybody you actually went to a fire, and you do it again tomorrow. And then the other part of this slide is the essentials of firefighting manuals. So I don't know if you're an IPSA state and if you've gone through this, firmly imprinted into my memory is what that cover looks like when I was a junior firefighter, in that book that I carried around every Monday and Wednesday night to class, and what that book told you. So I'll give a shout out to Nate Jameson. For those who take nozzle forward, he's part of the nozzle forward cadre. He's a Denver firefighter, and Nate did a very interesting analysis. It's still one of the most interesting things I've read, where he took basically the fire attack chapter from the last, I think, 5 versions of the essentials of firefighting, and went edition by edition and put what was added and what was taken out. So he kind of edited it like a term paper. He left the words in there, just put a strike through them, and then in a different color, put what was added. And by doing so, you start learning really quick how that textbook thumbprints you and what era you fought fire in, right? So the older versions, what do you think they were? 30-degree fog, indirect attack. And then, in the 90s, what do you think came? Penciling, short burst of water. And then now, essentially, it's come back around to more of a flow and move tactic that's backed up by the UL studies now. So the thing with this is, if our textbooks where we're supposed to get all of our information are constantly changing, and I learned from the new one, and the person I'm trying to discuss a nozzle change with learned in the old one, who's right? Well, if that thinking hasn't evolved, that can become a challenge. So I'm going to try to jump over here real quick. I have to do a new share, and this is a fire from my hometown where I live now, South Bend, Indiana, from 1982. So this is the era that my family fought fire in, and they all fought a lot of fire, right? And guess what? They all went out, and they were aggressive, and they saved lives, and they protected property, and it worked. But would these tactics work today? Probably not. So let's just take a watch real quick. Can everybody see it? Jerry, can you see it right?
Yes.
All right, cool. Let me make it a little bit bigger. How's that? So we got the rescue rig pulling up here, the old bread truck. Chief's car. You got the Ron Burgundy Anchorman news car in the background there. What we got? We got probably a room off, right? 2-story wood frame. Beautiful Mack rig pulling up. So this nozzle firefighter is Rick Fuda. His son works with me now in my fire department. And what's Rick got in his hands there? Not just single boosters, but dual boosters, baby, right? One for each hand. And then these guys, stretch away, come around the back, takes off a little bit, start breaking some windows. And what do we have? The 1.5 inch, right, with the 95-gallon-minute fog coming around the corner. So the point here, let me switch back here real quick. Everybody's got the slides up again, Jerry?
Yes.
Okay. So the point of that is, what they were doing in that video, was that wrong for 1982? 40 years ago at this point, 39 years ago? No, they did that every day in, day out. It worked. The fuel was different. The tactics were a bit different, but if the thinking hasn't evolved and you're stuck in that past, that's where you're going to see that lower target flow rate. That's where you're really going to have a hard time trying to explain, what that change that needs to happen. I just saw something the other day. Probably some of you did too. It was an awesome True ID bundle with fire by trade straps and a 40-year-old brass 95-gallon-minute fog nozzle. So, again, it's out there.
All right. Just a little follow-up to that, how that can bite you in the butt. A lot of our classes are attended by people that are trying to promote change in organizations that are reluctant to change. We get it, okay? And Stretch alluded to it a little bit. This is the American Fire Service. Sometimes you need to wait till somebody, retires or dies before you're going to get change in the organization. So there's a right way to approach change, and there's a wrong way. And if you approach change to someone who was thumbprinted a decade or two ago, who was very successful when they were in the field and could very well have spec'd the equipment that you're trying to get rid of, I wouldn't lead with the fact that what we have sucks. I would get a little bit more eloquent and do some research based on science and today's flow requirements that say it worked at the time, but things have evolved. Can we evaluate something that might give us a little bit more attack capability with a little bit less nozzle reaction, right? So that's normally where people do go when they're doing an evaluation. They want a higher flow with a lesser pressure because it relates to less nozzle reaction. And in many cases, you can increase your target flow if you're stuck in a 95 GPM world If you're doing 95 at 100, you can get up to an adequate target flow and it'll have less nozzle reaction than what you're dealing with now. That's the way to approach it. Approach it with facts, because personal opinion and emotion are not going to get you there. They're going to get you invited out of that chief's office. All right, so the old target flows run the old fire. New target flows need to address today's fire, right? Heat release rates are ridiculous. It's not that the fire's hotter. They're all hot. My first one was hot, my last one was hot. So were both of your first one and your last one. It's where we're engaging it and how quick it's going on. All right, next slide, please. All right, so there's probably not an engine company instructor on the circuit that would embrace anything below 150 on an 1.5-inch nut or 250 on a big line, a 2.5-inch coupling. And these are good benchmarks, but something to keep in the back of your mind, it's the basement. And what I mean by that is, if you're going in with 150, yeah, you're probably adequate for most, dwelling fires, but you're also one kink away from some significantly less flow. So, if you're at 150 and you kink down to 125 or 130, that's what you can engage with. If you start at 175 and you kink down to 150, you still got, a pretty decent fire streak. One way to approach this when you're in your evaluation is to think about GPM per working firefighter. All right. You've heard gallons per minute for years. You now hear gallons per second, how long we're flowing. If you can spec your rig to GPM per working firefighter, it kind of makes sense. What I mean by that is, if let's say you run 3, right? A boss, a driver, and 1 in the back. So that gives you basically 2 working people, 1 for sure, maybe 2 if the boss is working. What can you pull and what can you flow? Is your rig set up with rams or quick attack monitors where you can go big flow with a single firefighter quickly? Do you train to the paradigm of how to do a single firefighter deployment with a 2.5? I would ask the room, if we were in a classroom setting right now, how many firefighters does it take to put a 2.5 into operation? Well, 1 in a stationary position if you know what you're doing. But what's everybody else's memory of the 2.5, right? 5 or 6 guys doing the Iwo Jima lean, right? You're beating it up. It's like advancing a telephone pole. Well, the bottom line is, if you're stationary, what the hell are you doing standing up? Kneel on it, sit on it, do something, manage it, drive the nozzle reaction down. But with 2 firefighters working, 1 pulling a 2.5, 1 pulling a ram, I can flow the better part of 800 gallons a minute within, 35, 40, 50 seconds of arrival. That's big water. That's a high GPM per working firefighter. So if you have low staffing, I'd consider speccing your rig to a high flow per working firefighter. It's the same with the handline concept. I mentioned when we first started, the reality is you need to have an adequate flow for today's fire, but it needs to be manageable by 1. So, that first fire I showed where I gave the scenario of guys stretching. Let's say that's, Chris and I are making a move on that fire, right? Chris is on the knob and I'm number 2. So you're normally a couple bends to get to a fire in a dwelling. At the first one, we might be close. At the second bend, I'm sure as hell not with Chris. Where am I? I'm at the pinch point. So Chris is engaging fire by himself, which means he needs to be able to go full bell and engage fire without rolling around like a weeble. That's what we're talking about. That's manageable by 1 firefighter. You're blessed if you always have a number 2 behind you that really knows what he's doing and makes your job easy. But the reality is, if I asked everybody that's on this webinar, if you've been in a fire, you've attacked a fire by yourself. Whether you started with 2 or not, you've been on a knob by yourself. Slide. So here's just a quick visual. Let's say we arrive with a crew of 4 and we need 1,000 to effect a knockdown. You can yank an 1 3/4, 2 firefighters for 1 water 6 or 7 minutes. If the fire wasn't growing, it's simple math. Pull the big line, same 2 firefighters, it's half the time. Pull a quick attack monitor, a ram, and a 2.5 in 60 seconds, you've punched it in the face. And that's what we're talking about. In the years that I was blessed to be a fire officer and I ran fires, what I always wanted to hear was knocked down. And what I mean by that is, I know there's still a ton of work, but if it's knocked down, we're now controlling progressive fire growth. And to control progressive fire growth, it takes an overwhelming application of water versus BTU. And that's what you need to do. You don't come up and tickle a fire. You want to just smash it in the face, right? Get control and then get in and do your job. Next. Slide.
Yeah, here we go.
This is what we're looking to avoid. Okay. And, I would say, where are we on the curve on this one, right? You got a deep seated commercial fire that's obviously in decline at this point in time, and a single firefighter with a low caliber hand line. And, tomorrow morning at 7, this guy's a hero. Why? Because the fire goes out. And, most of those stories end with this saying, well, at least nobody got hurt. I tell you, when I was a fire chief and I wasn't at a fire and they were telling me what happened at a fire, and the story ended with, well, at least nobody got hurt, chief. That's the time to start asking questions, because in many cases that's masking poor performance. You see things like, I used to call it layering a fire. You'd pull up, you'd see an 1 3/4 or even a red line down, a big line on top of that. Pipes are in the air and the building's on the ground. They played catch up the entire time. And I'm not being ridiculous and saying, go to a master stream attack on a bedroom fire, but, if you got a choice, or if it's marginal, pull big, but have your rig spec to the point where it's easy to pull big. And for somebody that hasn't done a single firefighter deployment of a 2.5 in a stationary position, you don't want the first time to be at the fire that needs it. It would be better off to do that one in the parking lot ahead of time. And that said, let me just go off on the parking lot. I love this saying. I do have over 40 years in the firehouse. I've never been to a parking lot fire. I don't know anybody that's ever been to a parking lot fire, but that is where we do all our testing. And that's okay if we consider that to be the range. Like if you're into guns, the parking lot's the range. We're zeroing things in there, right? We want to get familiar with our weapon before we actually have to go to guns and use it. So all of that work in the parking lot might dial you down to an option that could make sense, but until you start getting into a training building or fires where you're going through bends and crawling over stuff in hallways like the real world is, you won't know if it works or not for your world. Slide. All right, so we went through this. GPM has to overcome BTU. We need to make sure that we can get to the seat of the fire, and that means the mobility. So the balance, you go back to that intersection of gallons per minute and pressure and how it relates to nozzle reaction becomes a big deal. Chiefs that haven't seen the street in a long time can spec whatever they want for equipment, and if it looks good on paper, you might be stuck working with it. I get it. There's national engine company and circuit instructors now that embrace nothing but 50 psi or 7/8 low pressure fog, and have to go back and work with 100 psi automatics with 90 GPM flow. It's just the real world. Everybody's working towards some sort of change. Eventually you'll get there. How you prepare the case for change is critical. Get the information factual and forget about your opinion. Most people really don't care what it is. Next slide. All right, so here's the balance. These are both extremes. We need to be somewhere in between, right? You've heard the analogies. You got a nice, decent bonfire going in the back, summer night, having a couple beers, you got people over, and you want to put the fire out. Which one's going to do it quicker, pressure or volume? You can squirt all day long with the King Long factory squirt bottle there. You can just get a couple buckets and pour it on the top. It's pretty obvious. Well, the same thing works in a confined environment. All right, slide. All right, how do we get there? We're not going to go deep into the actual testing. We show some pictures of it. The other half of this class would be hands-on, where we'd be out, for a couple hours doing just that. But that's how you're going to get to the solution package. We can build it on paper and we can get it to make sense on paper, but you still have to put it in the street and get it in your people's hands. Not everyone is going to get excited about it having an in-depth knowledge in hydraulics. I've been kidding around in my firehouse. We've been doing some training. One of our captains, Smitty, he's congratulations to him. He actually just got promoted captain of training. Nice job, Cap. He's been doing some deep hydraulics with a couple of our members. And we were actually on a cover assignment a couple of weeks ago, and we got to training, which we tend to do when we're on cover. We don't sit around and watch TV. We started pulling lines and getting into math. And that's all it is, okay? It's plumbing. Don't overcomplicate it, right? But you need to understand it. Slide. All right, so there it is. That's the target. That's your reality. An effective but manageable attack profile should drive your target flow, and it needs to be manageable by one firefighter. Slide. All right, this is our world. We don't guess anymore. We don't do theoretical math. There's certain things, and you see our app there, and I would hope that you have it on your phone. It's your friend. There's certain calculations that I rely on, and there's many that I won't. And when it comes to validating flow, a flow meter, as Stretch says, is the myth buster. You calibrate it before you start a flow session. You use pitos. You go old school. I mean, pito and a gauge will get you there. It's nice to have a flow meter, but you can do it without it if you trust your equipment. If you trust your equipment, you need to understand it to develop that trust. Those are a big portion of our brass tacks hard facts videos, is that type of equipment, how to calibrate it, how to understand it, and how to use it. Again, cutting and pasting somebody else's work might get you to the neighborhood, but it's not going to get you to the address. You got to do some ingrained organic stuff with your people. Slide. This is how we normally set up. We get a lot of dialogue going on this. Yes, you can test on the discharge side. You can test flow on the discharge side. By and large, when we're in the field, most of our SMEs, and that's an acronym for subject matter experts, and I'm proud to call them that, we normally put flow meters on the intake side because we're also trying to capture plumbing loss in the rig. Many people don't take that into consideration. And what I mean by that is, let's say you have an 1 3/4 front pull, it's off the bumper, and you also have a cross layer one off the rear. I would bet you probably pump them both at the same PDP. And I would also lay serious money on the fact that you're not flowing the same water out of it. Unless you've calculated the plumbing loss, especially going to a front bumper pull, which can be significant. And believe me, we run a couple of them, I know it is. You could be looking at 25, 30 PSI in plumbing loss before water even gets into the coupling, into the hose, where you're now going to miscalculate friction loss because you're using theoretical math based on true inside diameter. You could be looking at a chart that's giving you theoretical friction loss numbers of rigid pipe, not expandable firehouse. So you need this equipment. You need to understand how it works. You need to set it up the correct way. Otherwise, your head's going to explode in purple dust. And what I mean by that is, we get calls. Stretch, you get them all the time too. It's, oh my God, this isn't working. We got this gauge here, we got that gauge there, to find out, oh, well, they were running the tank to pump at the same time or something like that. When you set up in test mode, slow down, right? It's just like pulling up on a major, I will say, a low frequency, high risk fire. Kick back a notch, okay? Take your time here. When you're in test mode, you're not pushing hallways. You're determining what you're going to push hallways with. So forget the bravado and the drama. Test one line at a time, go deep, understand the plumbing loss, and come up with your numbers.
I'll say to you, we do, since, again, like Jerry said, this would typically evolve into like a hands-on, where we would go and set up the deck and show you where we put the gauges and why we put them where and how to get the readings. If you go to our Elkhart Brass YouTube, it's also posted on our Instagram and Facebook. I did an overview, I think last year, of like setting up the deck, basically how you would set this up, why you need 3 inline gauges, where you would put them at, where you get your pressure readings, where you get your flow readings, all that. So check that video out. It's like 6 or 7 minutes, but it goes a little bit deeper if you're trying to replicate this on your job. You acquired a flow test kit, you got one. It's, again, to do a thorough analysis to accommodate or compensate for plumbing loss, hose loss. Really, this is the way we suggest it.
And here's the reality: if you start a nozzle evaluation, you're going to do a hose evaluation too. And if you started a hose, you're going to end up evaluating your nozzles, because they're yin and yang. They got to work together. The 1962 testing standard. All pre-connected attack packages should be tested annually per this standard. And if they're modified at all throughout the year, they should be retested. Records kept. What drives that is the fact that people are not flowing what they think they're flowing out of their pre-connected attack packages. Because we come up with what rules of thumb for friction loss. Our 1 3/4 is going to be 35 per 100, 40, whatever your number is. Yet you have 2 or 3 vintages of hose. The yellow stuff, hey, that works really well. So, we tested that. But the red stuff and the green, you think it's the same as the yellow? Probably not. You got to test them all and avoid things like this. Firefighters are very creative individuals. If you came into the firehouse and if Stretch come in and I was his senior man and I said, engine 3's leaking, fix it. and he'd go and do something like this. Some people do that, they might even use torches and shit because they know how. Firefighters will do this. That flow is impacted by that setup. All right, slide. All right, a little bit about nozzles. We're going to go a little bit deep. We got some animations that are pretty good, and it goes back to actually one of the first people you saw on the slide tonight, Brian Kerr, who's magical with this type of thing. For years we used to carry cutaway nozzles trying to explain this, but it's always nice when you can add a sense or two to it. So there's primarily 4 types of nozzles the American Fire Service are exposed to. Smooth bore is one. The next 3 are what we are referred to as fogs or combis. There's fixed, selectable, and automatic. In many cases, people look at anything with a bumper that's a fog nozzle the same. That goes back to that 50, 80, and 100 mentality. Well, they're not. So, part and parcel of you getting into an evaluation would be, and I would encourage you to do this. Encourage you to, the first thing you need to do is identify what a target flow is that you're after. And once you identify what the target flow is, look at all the different types of equipment that you can get that'll give you that flow. And I would do it at, the 3 most common tip pressures, 50, 75, and 100. Put it in your people's hands. If you're accustomed to flowing 175 gallons a minute at 100 PSI, and I show you 175 gallons a minute at 50 PSI, you're gonna want to be my friend. And if you're flowing 125 or 130 at 100, and I put you into 50 PSI, and now you're flowing 160, and it's easier to hold on to, that's what we're talking about. That's where we provide epiphany through testing. All right, nozzle types. First one up. Smooth bore, relatively simple. Again, this is where it all started, Ben Franklin. And the fact that you can shut this off, as Stretch said, you're welcome. We did that. Okay, it's pretty simple. You got a ball shut off. In our case, all our waterways are 1 3/8 inch in size, unless you're in one of our jumbos. You got water that comes through that ball valve, and now we screw a tip on. And when we screw that tip on, we're creating a fire stream. It can be a short tip, it can be a long tip, it can be stacked tips, it can be whatever you want. The objective is achieve your target flow. What happens when you screw on that tip, there's hydraulically, the fire stream is created there. You've got a reduction in size in the waterway. So you've got a reduction in pressure, but an increase in speed. That's what gives us our stream. All right, the next one up is fixed, or sometimes referred to as constant GPM.
We're gonna, real quick, Jared, when we get through these, we do have a question.
Okay.
Let's get through the types.
Is it relevant to something I've already said? Should I pause now, or should?
Yeah, well, it's just, yeah. So from Sean Barrett, have you ever seen a difference in flow rates with a Foam Pro system, i.e. friction loss per 100 feet is 25 PSI, running water and flowing 160 at the tip with a 7/8. Then after introducing foam, the GPM increases with no change in pump at discharge pressures. So I guess the way I'm understanding this is you're flowing water, you turn your Foam Pro on, and you get a higher GPM reading with no change at the pump. Correct. Yeah. I mean, real quick, Sean, we run this on my department, 7/8, 200 foot Conquest or Combat Ready, depending on the rig. And when we look at that Foam Pro system, I've never seen a difference when we run foam or water. It's basically about the same. I have found the Foam Pros can be off a little bit. I just recently learned, because they're a sister company of ours. They're really easy to calibrate if you have an inline flow meter already hooked up. But I could say on our systems, I've never really seen a difference. If you want to, we'll put up our contact info at the end. If you want to shoot me an email, I'm happy to go a little deeper with one of our Foam Pro guys. Maybe it's a turbulence thing or something like that. But
yeah, I would agree. That's the way to go. If anything, I would think it'd be the other way. If you're bypassing the adductor, you'd have an
yeah, I mean, like, if we switch to CAFs, which we don't really run a whole lot, guys will turn on for overhaul or whatever. The flow rate goes down because you're flowing CAFs, but just switching foam system on or foam system off, I've never really seen a huge swing in that. So yeah, shoot us an email when we're all done, and we'll connect with you.
Okay, next up would be fixed or constant gallonage. And all these nozzles can be one piece or two piece. What I mean by that is it can be one solid piece, or it can be a break apart where the shutoff and the tip are separate from each other, or might even have an integrated smoothbore. But it's pretty straightforward. You got the same ball valve, water comes in through that instant 3/8 waterway, gets up into the barrel, and then the water hits the stem. Now that's an obstruction, right? So obviously the water has to get around it, and then it goes into the bumper, and that's where we can create the pattern. The fixed GPM, in this case, you're looking at a 150 at 50 stem. So by design, that is supposed to come out far enough so that you would flow 150 gallons a minute on the outside of that stem. That area of surface allows 150 gallons a minute out. That where that stem integrates into that bumper creates a pressure interface, which obviously gives you pattern control. So you can go wide fog, flush, or straight stream, whatever it may be. It's relatively simple. It's also the best-selling handline nozzle on the market with respect to combination nozzles, primarily because it's the one that you can get down to 50 PSI with adequate target flows for today's fires. Next up is our selectable, what we call our Phantom XD series. And a Phantom is a selectable gallonage nozzle, which means it's constant pressure. It can be either 75 or 100 PSI, but we've got a flow variant in this particular one at anywhere from 30 up to 200 GPM. We also have higher flows in a 2.5-inch nut. But so let's assume that, we've got this at 75 PSI flowing 125 gallons a minute. Well, in this case, I can actually click it up to a 200 GPM position. But the thing that's critical here is I'm not going to get 200 GPM just by doing that, because the nozzle is not going to make more water. I'm going to have an increase in pressure to deliver that flow. And conversely, if I choked it down to 30, I probably wouldn't be flowing more than 30 without a modification in pressure. So if this design nozzle is your choice, it's great because it's a big multitasker. I mean, you can have low flow for a vegetation or a dumpster fire or car fire or something like that, but you can also dial up to a higher flow for a different application. Many people that use these in the field for structural attack, the feedback that I get when we interact with them is it's not that they don't work, but it's very easy to accidentally roll that GPM selector when you're changing pattern with a gloved hand in the dark. So inadvertently, you could think that you're just changing pattern and close your hole down to 30 GPM. But if this design is your choice, it's a multitasker, and there it is. It functions pretty much the same way. Water goes in, interfaces with the stem, and then creates the ability to do straight stream or fog. And then when you change the GPM selector, it just moves the tip in relationship to the barrel to allow more water or less water. Last up for combis is the redheaded stepchild of the fire service. People hate these, probably because they don't understand them, is the automatic nozzle. By and large, was promoted as the simplest solution to the American fire service in the 70s and the 80s. It looks the same as everything else, but it is drastically different. There's a ton of engineering in this nozzle. So you got water coming through the waterway, you see it engaging with the stem, but now you see a spring mechanism. And all automatics have flow ranges. This particular model is 60 through 200 GPM at 100 PSI, which means it's constant pressure, but variable flow. And that flow is varied through what? Energy. It's RPM. The other feature of this nozzle that can be a detraction is the appearance of the stream. By that spring maintaining constant pressure against the stem, the stream can look the same at a low flow as it does at a high flow. So unless you have a high degree of experience with this nozzle and a fair amount of work with it, you could be flowing 80 or 90 gallons a minute when you think you're flowing 150 or 160, and visually you would have no indication that you had a problem. If this isn't your choice for a structural fire attack line, a very simple way to take it out of contention would be to put in a benchmark in your evaluation that you want a visual indicator of a compromised supply. And what I mean by that is if one of your criteria states, I don't want a nozzle that's not going to show me I got a problem or a kink, because an automatic will mask that. The fixed, a selectable, or a smooth bore is going to show a degradation in the stream immediately, because it doesn't have a spring to increase that tension on the pressure to maintain reach. This nozzle is still very valuable. We still have a ton of them. A lot of them go into the industrial arena, where you're on fixed water systems, where you have a variant of supply from the system. And this is the perfect nozzle for foam applications, for bee foam applications. Everybody's head explodes when they try and do math on a bee foam application. As long as you got 200 PSI to the inlet side of your ductor, throw an automatic on there. Whatever's coming out of that, they automatically give you the best reach you can. And if you're on a tanker or rollover job or something like that, believe me, you're going to want some reach anyway. Slide.
1 second. And real quick for everybody watching, these are newer animations we just did last year, but because of COVID, we really haven't been able to present them. but they all are on our YouTube channel. And the other secret for those that you don't know of Vimeo, if you've ever heard of Vimeo, Vimeo, all these are on our Elkhart Brass Vimeo page. So what that means is you can download from Vimeo. So YouTube, you can't really download unless you have an add-on or a secret tool to copyright or screen record. But if you go to the Elkhart Brass Vimeo, you can download all these animations. So if you're trying to do a presentation, you're trying to teach your department, trying to learn for yourself, you can download these exact files, as well as all of our Brass Tacks episodes. You can download the actual version of them. So anyway, that's my pitch for that.
No, I'm glad you shared that, because it inevitably Stretch. Anytime we're doing a class in the field, there's several people who will walk up afterwards and ask for the presentation. Or at least
people are like, well, have you guys thought about putting them all on a DVD? It's like, well, why would we do that for the cost and charge you guys to do it? And you just go to Vimeo and download them. Everything's there. So.
And that when you're justifying the case for change, any sense you can add makes a big sense. I'm talking senses like smell. You're adding sight, you're adding visual. All right, so here we're back to that intersection again, which is the nozzle reaction, right? So nozzle reaction is the NR. It's measured in pounds force, and plenty of valid studies by people smarter than all of us were done, and somewhere between 60 and 70 pounds should be average for the manageable by the average crew, and that's crew. So, I'm not saying you don't have single firefighters that can handle 70 pounds of nozzle reaction and push it down a hallway. You probably do, but I'm sure you have firefighters that can't do that. The point being is, if I was standing up right now, you'd see I'm a pretty decent sized guy. I'm 6'4", and I'm not quite as heavy as I used to be, but let's say I'm 160, 165 pounds. Is it going to be the same for me as it for somebody that's 5'8" and 135 pounds? And the point is the number becomes arbitrary. So what you need to do is, you can do the math to say, okay, this should work, but until you put it in your people's hands, your big guy next to your small guy and the small guy next to the, even smaller guy, whatever it may be, you have to put it in their hands. You don't have to convince them with the math. You just have to let them feel it. Say, this is what you're accustomed to feeling. Now feel this. And one of the things I suggest when you're in test mode, every time you make a major change for your people to try, start with the same 2 people and have what we call the scribe, the person that's taking your notes, have them standing right next to it, those people. So, let's say it's Stretch and I, and the first time we try this, and Stretch is like, holy shit, I can do this by myself. I can hip shoot it like a cowboy. Or he says, it's kicking my butt. We're writing that down because that's valid afterwards, right? I want to know what my senior people think or what my new people think. Could be different answers there. All right, next slide. This is what we're looking to avoid, is, the firefighter's having difficulty with that line. You can see the bail is almost all the way back. He's doing a pretty strong lean. He's going to lose the line eventually. You've got to get to the point where, whether it be through technique, body style, whatever it may be, you have to come up with a technique to absorb nozzle reaction. We've got a ton of Brass Tacks hard facts that'll help you to do that from a technique standpoint. But bottom line is, you might be trying to get too much water out of your lines, and your firefighters can't handle it. All right, next slide. And this one's extremely pivotal, this slide. So, this is how we get to the neighborhood through math. Let's see, you've got target flows low to high going left to right across the bottom, and pounds force nozzle reaction low to high going up the left side. Let's say, for the sake of conversation, our target flow is 150. So you're seeing 3 nozzle reaction numbers there. The yellow one is 50 PSI, red is 75, and the gray is 100. So if I'm flowing 150 gallons a minute at 75 PSI, I'm outside of that perception of comfort range of 60 to 70. But if I drop down to a 75 PSI delivery system, now I'm down to 65 pounds nozzle reaction. And if I can deliver it with a 50 PSI appliance or nozzle, I'm down to 53. Now, if your hose will support a 50 PSI and you're accustomed to holding on to 75 pounds of nozzle reaction, we put you in a 50, you can hip shoot that like a cowboy. You can do it by yourself. So in evaluations, many times we'll take that 75, let's say that's what you're using, 150 to 100 PSI automatic, and you're accustomed to 75 pounds of nozzle reaction. Well, look at what you can invest into more flow by reducing your tip pressure, right? So anything that's below that 75, you can handle because that's what you're accustomed to holding on to. So you could actually hop up to 200 gallons a minute at 50 PSI, and it's actually easier to hold on to. And how do you justify that? Again, in the next slide, I'll show you. And this is just using our app off of the phone. You pick the flow rate. The flow rate remains constant. And what I've changed there is the nozzle pressure. We have 50, 75, and 100 in the corresponding nozzle reaction numbers, right? I don't want to flow 175 gallons a minute at 100 PSI because I'm going to need to bail down whenever I try and move, and I'm going to need to be sitting on it if I'm a small firefighter. Yet 175 gallons a minute at 50 PSI is 62 pounds. On an 1.5-inch coupling hand line, anything that starts with a 5 or a low 6 is your friend. That's manageable nozzle reaction, even in the absence of technique. All right, next slide. When I go to spec, and this is what I would encourage you, you don't have to do it. It's just something that I found that makes it easier. When you establish the crew, the committee that's going to look at this evaluation to promote change, one of the first benchmarks you could come up with is what you want for a target flow. You may be surprised, maybe not. I'm still surprised to this day the amount of organizations I interact with that don't have a target flow objective in print. And your entire Tacks system should be designed to deliver a certain amount of water. So target flow by line size is job one for an evaluation committee. So the first F is flow. Next is functionality. You know, what do I want it to do? Well, I like fog. Okay, so I like fog. But I like smoothbore too. Okay, so you're writing this down. We do foam. Okay, so all of the things you want it to do will drive you to the type and what form it will take. And what I mean by that is, you know, if you find that you're constantly adding a length because you stretch short, then you're going to want a 2-piece nozzle. So that's the form. You're going to want to break apart so that you can add that length and put the fog tip on the end. If you want a smoothbore and a fog in one combined unit and use an integrated smoothbore, that's a break apart. That's a 2-piece nozzle. So that's form. So function drives the form in this case. So flow, then function, then form, and lastly frosting. You know, we've done a great job for the American Fire Service. We heard you. You like to make things personal. You can get so many different tip colors and variations on our stuff. You can get them to glow in the dark. None of that should be the primary purchasing motive. It's last. You can have a pretty one or a purple one or a pink one and have horrible flow out of it and get your butt handed to you at a fire, right? And unfortunately, manufacturers have contributed to this problem over the years. You know, you've got nozzles that basically, you know, kickstands, they vibrate, they glow in the dark. Pretty soon you'll have a chip that tells you how great you are. It really should be it should be so simple that on and off should not be challenging. Now, we still print on and off on our bales because some people maybe are challenged by that, but it needs to be simple and intuitive, right? All the way back is the most water and already forward is closed and nothing in between. Just that simple. So start with flow, then function, functionality, form, and lastly frosting. Slide. All right. And then again, you've got to get into the parking lot. That's where you're going to start. And you're going to end up in a training center. Anybody can be a rock star in a stationary position in a parking lot. anybody can look like a rock star with a 10-foot push on pavement. All right. Now, I don't know where you fight fire, but like the hallways that I go down aren't like parking lots. They don't slide real easy, and you're climbing over, baskets of clothes and toys and bookshelves that have come down, and that's not even a hoarder type situation. So that's where it needs to work. So dial in the package and then get into the building, see if your people can manage it. From a nozzle evaluation point, one of the resources that we can give you, and hit up me for a contact on this. Everybody gets wrapped up in flow, reach, and maneuverability, which are 3 primary objectives of an evaluation committee. There's about 40 other things you should really take into consideration. So step back and do a thorough job in your evaluation, and you have a much higher probability of promoting change, even if the organization is reluctant to change. Slide.
Okay. So I'm going to drive us here through the rest of these slides. We're doing pretty good on time, just a little bit longer. And what this is kind of the stuff that, I should say, us as a manufacturer can bring to an engine class that, even the best engine guy can't. Is we're a manufacturer. So we know what we make every day. We know what leaves our doors. And through our recent Vote GPM survey, if you've seen that or participated in that, we actually have a little bit better idea of what's out in the fire service too. So we're going to talk about that. So what this is here is a little geeky here. We're going to go in the weeds, and that's kind of our gig, is to stay in the weeds and break it down for you. This is like the product life cycle, right? So on the left, you have the early adopters. So those are the people that wait in line for the iPhone, right? And they camp out and they want to be the first ones to have it. And these type of people, they're always the ones with the latest stuff. And then you have the grandma there, who's the laggard, who eventually has to get a jitterbug phone if she ever wants to talk to her grandson again. So these early adopters tend to set a lot of trends and what things pick up or don't pick up. And with our XD product line, we kind of had an interesting point of reflection in that we could go back and see, we've been making these nozzles for a long time, even our modern product, where the XD was kind of a reset for us. So what are people buying right away, right? So these are people that are just outfitting their rigs. And we're going to talk about kind of some of those trends. So, again, that XD came out in 16. That's when brass tacks hit. We saw an instant increase in smoothbore and fixed flow fogs. These are people out doing flow testing. And making changes in their organizations. That red line is automatics, and gray is selectable, relatively flat. So what's that kind of tell you? People aren't necessarily getting out of them or getting into them. Particularly the selectable is very flat. You kind of have them, you're happy with them, and you move on. The bigger story is the pressure trend. And this is, we've seen over the last a couple decades, what the first 50 psi nozzle was made for Chicago, a chief nozzle with Dave Fornell, I think in the 70s, 80s. So again, people talk these newfangled low pressure nozzles when in reality, this technology has been out for 40, 30 years here. But definitely we've seen more of a pressure trend up and a low pressure trend up, and that 100 psi going down. And I put a little asterisk there. And the point of that is that, your hose must be able to properly support that 50 psi nozzle. So here's a great example of an older legacy style hose construction and a modern hose construction, flowing the same amount of water, handled the same way. And clearly one has a large kink and one's not kinking at all. For years and years, fire hose really didn't change much. It is very well apparent, if you're paying attention, that hose manufacturers are changing, right? They're starting to educate more. They're starting to listen to their customers more. They're starting to come up with good solutions that pair with nozzles. And, kink resistance, low friction loss, high flow, yada, yada, right? Where in the past, even 10 years ago, hose was kind of considered a commodity. Hey, I need another 500 feet of red, well, what size? 1 3/4. Cool, right? But then the problem came. You would go and we field this question regularly. Hey, what the hell's wrong with these nozzles? We went and bought all brand new low pressure smooth bore, our state of the art low pressure fogs, and our guys can't hold on to them. Our hose kinks. We've never had this problem before, right? And again, it's an absolute pairing between the hose and nozzles, and it is a system. And I think people are starting to learn that more, and I think forums like this really help that. And Jerry said, my department did the same thing, is we changed nozzles and we found out we had a hose problem, right? Or sometimes it goes the other way. I needed to change hose and oh my God, I got a nozzle problem. So they definitely go hand in hand. With our XD fogs, 60% of them, 2/3 are 50 PSI. So that mantra that the 100 PSI fog is king, that you probably learned in that essentials book, it's false. At least what's going out our door today. Only 6% of those nozzles are 100 PSI. When I look at this chart, anything in red is a 75 PSI nozzle. Anything in gold is a 50, and anything in gray is 100. So right away, just look at the colors. You can tell all the grays are to one side, the 100 PSIs. Not a lot of people buying them. The most common is a 95. And where do we see that? Typically, it's on foam lines. Somebody will buy a 95 gallon at 100 nozzle dedicated to their foam tube, and it's paired to the inductor. On the other side, a 150 at 75 still remains one of our most common fog tips. Why is that? Well, you talk about large agencies that have mixed hose fleets, okay? You have a large department like a Chicago that runs a 150 at 75 that can't go and buy all brand new, true diameter inch hose for their entire organization, right? A mixed hose fleet, you pump it a little bit hot at 75, it's still very manageable nozzle reaction and hitting your target flow. So that nozzle solves a lot of problems and still gives you good flow at low nozzle reaction. And then right after that, boom, 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 the next 4, 50 PSIs, sorry, the next 3 there, and 3/4 flow rates, 45 PSI, 45% makes that up of what's leaving our doors. So that's the trends for sure. When we talk smoothbore, right? We love this debate, right, of 7/8, 15/16. The inch and 3/16, the missing tip, the inch and 16th, if you will, is another new tip. Kind of very niche, very nice for 2-inch or 2 1/4 hose if you're running that or considering that. But again, 7/8 has really taken off the last couple of years, and a big part of what Jerry just told you all about is I think mobility. Is the ability for somebody to flow that line by themselves. We talk, you take that 7/8, pump it a little bit hot, get about a 170 out of it, get some nice smack, and help get out some of those kinks. It can solve hose problems. If you do have a mixed hose fleet, a smaller hole in the 7/8 will create a little bit more back pressure behind the line to help you alleviate some of that kinking. So again, we've definitely seen a resurgence of the 7/8 here in the last couple of years. Then digging in a little bit deeper. So in 2016, if anybody watching followed us back then, we did it was more of a fun marketing campaign called Vote GPM. So with the election, we did a thing where you went and you voted for your favorite tip size. And you voted for your favorite tip size, and we mailed you a sticker, and then we posted the results, and we kind of had some fun with it. And the funny part in 2016 was 15/16, swept it, over 50% of the vote. This is our, this is the favorite, right? The popular vote, if you will. Same thing on the 2 1/2 was the inch and 3/16 was the popular tip. That was everybody's favorite tip. Okay. So 2020 comes around. We kind of have this opportunity now to turn this marketing campaign into something a bit more educational. So when we're out promoting this, instead of now voting for your favorite tip size, we asked you, and anybody watching that did it, I appreciate it if you did. We asked you to fill out a short 10-question survey. We called it the Fire Flow Poll. And it was some basic questions. What's your, what size nozzle you're on for residential flows, commercial flows? Do you flow test your nozzles? How old are they? What's your target flow rate? And we had some prizes we gave away at the end. And at the end of this whole deal, over 47 days, we had 3,351 entries. So anybody that goes deep on statistics, and we're posting some of the results now, and a lot of people are going, oh man, it's just Elkhart people filled that out. Well, we did sponsored posts across Facebook. It just wasn't on our page, and almost 3,500 votes. That's a pretty good sample size. So digging into that, here's what kind of some of those results found was we talk, I call this America's tip, right? So our residential fire attack nozzles. So the 3,351 people that responded to our poll last year, 7H just narrowed out 15/16s. Okay. So although here, you know, we're selling them, you know, basically 2 to 1, 3 to 1, there's still a whole lot of 15/16s out there, right? So what explains that? I don't know. You could read into it. People getting into smoothbore, maybe. My department's one of them, getting into it for the first time, where we've been primarily fog organization. And then 15/16s being the longstanding tip. And then the interesting thing is there's still a lot of 100 PSI, right? Selectable and automatic 100 PSI still make up the third and fourth position there, all the way down the line. So I'm going to go through a couple of these results. I didn't put it in here, but if you go to votegpm.com, so that's where you went to vote, go to votegpm.com. You can do it when you're done. You can download the full report. So all these slides I'm going to show you, there's 42 pages of data that breaks all of these results down. So again, if you're trying to tell your story of maybe why you need to change, what's popular in your region, what's not, what's popular in this region, we broke it all the way down to 8 different regions, flow rates, flow testing, whatnot. So I'm going to go over some of those results and kind of showed some of the trends that we saw. It's really interesting. But you can go to Vote GPM and download all this stuff for free. Commercial attack line. Remember this one, right? I like this one. Inch and 3/16 won the popular vote. Overwhelmingly, inch and 1/8 is still by far the most common attack nozzle for commercial fire attack, right? Then inch and 3/16, back to those 100 PSI selectables and automatics. Inch and 1/4 making a good stand. So again, good data to know what the trends are. Then we went by region. So these different color blocks are different regions, 8 different regions, the top 3 nozzles for residential attack. As I always point out to Jerry, you know, 15/16 still up in the Northeast, holding strong. I like when you go down the Southeast, 1 inch makes a blip there. In the central part of the US, a lot of selectable flows are common. And then fog nozzle country still in the Southwest. Commercial attack, same thing, pretty much it is inch and 1/8 all the way across the board is the most common nozzle used for commercial fire attack lines. Then again, kind of balances out, you know, the mid-Atlantic there, the Carolinas, we call it, you know, all smoothbore on the top 3. Inch and 1/4, those high flow nozzles really making an impact there in the Southeast. And then this one too, by region, right? The great fog smoothbore debate, right? So again, you go up to the Northeast, New York, 50% smoothbore, 46% fog. Then you go to the Southwest, East versus West, 62% fog, 37% smoothbore. So these trends, you know, start to correlate. The don't knows, those were just, you know, bunk answers. Somebody clicked, they didn't know. I assume they write on the ladder company or on a medic or something. But, you know, when we did 3,500 respondents, you're always going to get a handful that are not applicable or whatever. So that kind of caused a blip. But still, and some of it's miseducation, right? Commercial attack. I think the really interesting thing here between commercial and residential is that people want to talk smoothbore versus fog. We are not afraid of the smoothbore for a commercial attack, but it's a lot less on residential. So, you know, why is that? Oh, I don't know. Like Jerry mentioned, the Iwo Jima lean. You know, would you rather be on a 100 PSI automatic 2.5 nozzle or even an inch and 1/4, an inch and 3/16, inch and 1/8, right? Nozzle reaction. Reach, penetration, primarily defensive line, whatever the answer might be, very apparent that smoothbores are way more common on commercial attack lines than they are residential. So again, and we talk nozzle age. How old are your nozzles? So of our respondents, about just under 2/3 or less than 9 years old. Okay, but you get into some of them 20 years or older. 6% of that. Basically 15% of the respondents just over that were 15 years or older on their nozzles. So is there a life expectancy on a nozzle? Well, you know, sure, you can maintain them and flow test them. But again, I would say, you know, again, we all know the example. Jerry mentioned the $750,000 pumper with the dual rotor rays and the Federal Qs and the graphics package and the blacked out, murdered out look, which costs more money, by the way, which I think is kind of interesting, like a lot more, right? Like, you know, to not have to polish chrome. But anyway, but you're still taking, you know, that brand new murdered out rig shows up, and what do? You take all your old 20-year-old stuff and you put it on there and you go fight fire like you did before and never think twice about it. And then we talked about flow testing. So NFPA 1962 changed a few years ago, and they say now you should flow test all of your tack lines, all your nozzles, all your appliances. If you change it, you should retest it. And I know a lot of people go, "Oh my gosh, are you kidding me?" You know, but on the other hand, we still test our ladders, our pumps, and when we talk about testing hose, this isn't a hydrostatic test of hose. This is a flow test of hose. So you could have, for example, say a delaminated section of hose, and the liner on the inside looks all wrinkly, and it's going to double the friction loss through that hose. You're not going to find that when you go do hose testing every year. When you hydrostatic test it, you're only going to find that through a flow test. So again, compliance on this is very low, only about a third doing it. So again, check out our YouTube page. There's a little video I put together showing you kind of our steps of how we do it, and a little kit that we have, and we'll put our contact info at the end. You know, if you can't afford one of these things and you want to get a baseline, hit us up. We have a loaner program. We can get something out to you. And then the one I really love is kind of my soapbox, Jerry. Jerry always liked this part, and it's a lot more fun we get to do in person, is pistol grip preference. Okay. So, and this one actually does surprise me, but this is of XD nozzles that we sell now in the last couple of years. Only about 35% of them come with a pistol grip. Okay. So, I love it now, right? And you'll see the pictures kind of like this, where, you know, you'll have, you know, the whole, nozzles lined up on the front bumpers with their, you know, the brand new hose and their attack package, and how much time and effort and everything went into that. So for example, you know, when we did this on my fire department, we tested everything. We ended up with like 72 points of data, right? And we do them, you've probably seen some of our pictures. We do them on the big Post-it board, sticky Post-it notes. We do them on the side of the rig. So as we're getting the data, we're writing it down. It makes it really nice so everybody can kind of see what's happening. You track it. You understand it, you can dissect it. Then when we're analyzing all this and making the report, hang them up in your training division, so that way everybody's got to walk by them, whether they're involved in it or not, going, what are these guys doing? You know, well, we're getting our hard facts, our data. So again, at the end of a nozzle study, you might only care about 5 or 6 of those points, but you might have had to do 70 of them to whittle that down, kind of like a funnel, right? So what I'm getting at is it takes a lot of work to get to the final package. And you might come to it and go, well, we have pistol grips, and guys are going to whine about the pistol grips, or whatever it might be. So the nozzles come with pistol grips, and the guys line them all up on the bumper like those photos and throw on the internet. And what do you hear right away is, "Oh my God, bro, got to get rid of those pistol grips, cut them off," right? And I love Ray McCormack because he always says, you know, every nozzle in the FDNY comes with a pistol grip, right? You either choose not to use it or you take it off, right? Some guys like it as an extra handle. You can hook it on the rafter, whatever it might be, but don't let the pistol grip, cloud your vision of maybe what they went through to get that, or maybe what you'll have to get through. At the end of the day, the pistol grip might be the compromise, right? Let it go. It's not that big a deal. They are removable. The lineup here came from a conversation with Brian Brush. And again, you go on the internet now and it's awesome. And you really see this resurgence of engine. So, you know, we joke, and I go back to that story I opened with in 2002 of showing up in the Andy Fredericks golf tournament, and all those guys were into engine. Engine was cool to those guys. It seems now engine is cool again. It's always been cool to us, right? But what is it? We're sharing information better. There's programs like Nozzle Forward and going to Fire Department Training Network, or going to Pensacola Beach and going to H-Rock, where there's a lot more availability to the access of the engine company. There's great new products, right? From nozzles to new hose designs to things that have been neglected for a long time that gives a lot more energy to it. So what I'm getting at here with the quote is, when we start to see more nozzle pictures than, burned up helmet pictures, I think, then that's where we're starting to change the fire service. So, it's been this great kind of perfect storm of training and information, and brass tacks we think's had a little bit of part of that. And you guys being on here tonight and joining us and trying to learn and make change in your own organization. It's a big deal. So engine is cool again. And I hope everybody on here, it's always been cool, and you need to show other people it's cool to keep beating that one up. But this is our contact information, email, cell phone. We're accessible all the time. I get dirty looks from my wife at like 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night. Are you texting about nozzles again? Yeah, it's only 4 o'clock in Hawaii, So anyway, Jerry, what do you got to add?
Nothing. I just we're kind of humbled. We appreciate the opportunity to be here. You use the lifelines. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. There is going to take some work, but hit one of us up, or we'll roll you out to one of our regional guys. We get it, and Chris said it before, but I'll repeat it. This equipment testing equipment is expensive. If you can't afford to buy it, let us know. We'll get it to you. We're not going to come and try and ram the yellow one down your throat. We'll just send it to you. You can do your own testing. We'll help you get squared away. Our end game is fire out and everybody goes home. So we make stuff that makes that happen. Whether you choose the right stuff or not is entirely up to you. We're not there to tell you what to do with that. COVID's been tough. Our guys are in the street though. We're back. We're being safe. We got a couple pretty decent high profile events coming up. We'll be teaching down at H-Rock here in a couple weeks, and I'm in Orlando the week after that. And we're doing classes just like this. If you're signed up for them, I look forward to catching up with you in the field. When we are in the field, we get that hands-on component, and that's where we get really interactive. It's just firemen doing fireman stuff and firefighters doing firefighter stuff. And we're on our hands and knees flowing water, and that's where you're gonna get the ammunition you need for change. So I'll just close with thanks, and we're a resource. If you need us, just reach out.
Yep, that's it. Thanks guys for tuning in. Jeff, you want to close us out?
Yeah, man. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sean Barrett, if you will, shoot us an email and we'll hook you up with our Phone Pro guy. I texted one of them here during the thing and I didn't get a solid answer without going a little bit deeper with you. So get in touch with us and we'll make it happen.
All right. Thanks, gents. Appreciate it. Hope you all have a good night.
All right. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks.